Welcome to the One in the Many. My name is Arshak Ben-Lian. My purpose with the One in the Many podcast is to explore the process of integration as developmentally formative and therapeutically corrective factor in human psychology. The One in the Many is the study of how conscious life differentiates identity, integrates relation, regulates itself under constraint, and sustains direction through time. Subscribe to the One in the Many podcast and connect with me by writing to abenlian@oneinthemany.net. Aristotle understood that to explain any phenomenon adequately, one must answer four questions. What is it made of? What gives it its form? What brings it into being? What is its end or purpose? His doctrine of the four causes was not merely a philosophical classification, but an attempt to identify the minimum conditions necessary for understanding reality. More than 2,000 years later, physics arrived at its own tetradic structure. The universe appears governed by four fundamental interactions: gravity, electromagnetism, the strong interaction, and the weak interaction. While these forces are mathematically distinct, together they provide the conditions under which matter can exist, organize, transform, and persist. Gravity gathers matter into stars and galaxies. The strong interaction binds atomic nuclei into stable structures. Electromagnetism governs atomic and molecular relationships. The weak interaction enables transformation through decay and transmutation. Existence, stability, relation, and transformation emerge as the four fundamental dimensions through which the physical universe unfolds. Chemistry inherits these physical foundations, but reveals a new level of organization. At the chemical level, the primary concerns become structure, bonding, energy, and equilibrium. Structure determines what a substance is. Bonding explains how distinct elements become unified wholes. Energy provides the capacity for transformation. Equilibrium maintains continuity amid change. A molecule is not merely a collection of atoms. It is a pattern of relationships stabilized through energetic exchange. Chemistry, therefore, introduces a principle that becomes increasingly important as complexity grows. That principle is the process of integration. Atoms become molecules not by losing their identities, but by participating in a higher order organization that preserves and extends their capacities. Biology extends this principle further. Living systems reveal a tetrad of structure, metabolism, regulation, and reproduction. Structure provides the differentiated architecture of life. Metabolism acquires and transforms energy. Regulation preserves integrity through homeostasis. Reproduction extends life through time. Life represents a profound shift in the history of the universe. Whereas chemistry concerns the transformation of matter, biology concerns the preservation of identity through transformation. A living organism continuously changes while maintaining its organizational integrity. Every cell participates in a ceaseless exchange of matter and energy. Yet the organism remains recognizably itself. Life, therefore, introduces a dynamic unity between persistence and change. The organism survives not by resisting transformation, but by integrating it. The emergence of consciousness brings the process to an even higher level. The biological imperatives of information, energy, regulation, and adaptation become transformed into the psychological realities of consciousness, energy, balance, and time. Consciousness identifies reality. Energy provides the capacity for action. Balance maintains functional integrity. Time allows development to unfold. These are the four fundamentals of psychology as identified within the one in the many. What is remarkable is that they appear to be the psychological expression of principles already visible throughout nature. Physics asks how matter persists. Chemistry asks how matter relates. Biology asks how life survives. Psychology asks how consciousness flourishes. At every level, the same underlying architecture reappears. Viewed through the lens of the one in the many, the progression from physics to psychology can be understood as a hierarchy of increasing integration. The physical universe integrates particles into stable structures. Chemistry integrates atoms into molecules. Biology integrates molecules into a living organism. Psychology integrates perceptions into concepts, values, purposes, and identities. At each stage, differentiation increases while integration becomes more demanding. An atom is more complex than a subatomic particle. A cell is more complex than a molecule. A mind is way more complex than a cell. Yet the same process remains operative. New levels of organization emerge through the successful integration of prior levels into coherent wholes. This observation reveals why integration occupies such a central place. Integration is not merely a psychological mechanism. It is the process by which complexity becomes sustainable. Whatever reality exhibits increasing order, increasing capability, and increasing continuity through time, integration is present. The four lessons of life, appetite, vulnerability, fragility, and uncertainty, can also be understood within this universal framework. Appetite reflects the energetic requirements of existence. Vulnerability reflects the openness necessary for relationship. Fragility reflects the structural limits of every organized system. Uncertainty reflects the temporal horizon into which all action projects itself. These lessons are not accidents of human experience. They are the lived expression of the same realities that physics, chemistry, and biology encounter in their own domains. Every organism must acquire energy. Every structure can be damaged. Every relationship entails exposure. Every future contains unknowns. The lesson of life, therefore, mirrored the fundamental conditions of reality itself. This progression ultimately illuminates the meaning of the one in the many. The one is not merely an individual among a collection. It is the principle of integration that allows the many to become a coherent whole. A person is one among many experiences, perceptions, memories, values, and relationships. The task of integration is therefore universal. Nature itself appears to move toward increasing orders of unity without erasing differentiation. The more advanced the system becomes, the more differentiation it must coordinate, and the greater the demand for integration. Seen in this light, the one in the many is not simply a psychological theory. It is an attempt to articulate a principle already visible throughout the hierarchy of existence. From the forces of physics to the reactions of chemistry, from the metabolism of biology to the aspirations of conscious life, the same pattern repeats. Differentiated elements are gathered into higher order wholes that preserve identity while extending capability. The history of the universe can therefore be understood as the progressive emergence of integration. Consciousness does not stand apart from this story. It is its most advanced expression currently known. Through volition, purpose, and reason, human beings become capable of participating consciously in the very process that has shaped reality from the beginning. In that sense, integration is not merely something we observe in nature. It is the activity through which we become fully human. Every human life begins not with purpose, but with action. An infant enters the world without a formulated philosophy, without a theory of meaning, and without a consciously chosen direction. What the infant possesses is awareness and the capacity to attend. The eyes track movement, the ear orients towards sound. The body reaches, grasps, balances, and explores. At this earliest stage, existence presents itself as a succession of immediate experiences. The child's first challenge is not discovering purpose, but acquiring competence. Learning to crawl, stand, walk, and speak are achievements of coordination. The child repeatedly directs attention toward the environment and gradually gains control over bodily movement. Through countless attempts and corrections, perception becomes linked to action. The world becomes intelligible because the child learns what can be done within it. As development continues, these elementary competencies expand into more refined skills. Language becomes more precise. Motor control becomes more coordinated. Social interactions become more nuanced. The child discovers that some actions produce desired outcomes more reliably than others. A growing sensitivity to consequence emerges. Experience becomes organized around patterns of success and failure. At first glance, skill appears merely practical. Yet something deeper is occurring. Every acquired skill reduces uncertainty. Every successful action increases the individual's capacity to predict the consequences of future action. The child who learns to walk gains not merely locomotion, but access to a larger world. The child who learns language gains not merely vocabulary, but access to communication, learning, and social cooperation. Skills, therefore, expand possibility. This becomes increasingly visible in relationships. Consider the bond between parent and child. The parent wakes during the night, prepares meals, answers questions, teaches manners, comforts fears, and establishes boundaries. Each of these activities requires specific competencies. Patience, communication, emotional regulation, and observation as skills developed through practice and refinement. Yet, over time, it becomes apparent that these individual acts are not isolated events. They are connected by something larger. The parent is not simply responding to today's circumstances. The parent is acting with reference to the future adult that the child may become. The countless skills of caregiving are organized around a projected possibility that extends far beyond the present moment. The same pattern appears in marriage. A husband and wife learn to communicate, negotiate disagreements, coordinate responsibilities, and express affection. These skills make daily life more harmonious and productive. Yet the relationship cannot be sustained by technique alone. The various competencies acquire significance because they contribute to a shared future. The couple is not merely solving today's problems, they are building a life together. Their actions derive meaning from a horizon that extends beyond the immediate situation. The relationship between skill and future orientation becomes even more obvious in business. An entrepreneur develops expertise in sales, finance, operations, leadership, and product development. Each skill increases effectiveness. Each competency allows greater value to be created with less wasted effort. Yet no successful business exists solely because its founder possesses skills. The skills are coordinated by a vision of something that does not yet exist. The entrepreneur sees a possibility before it becomes actual. The business begins as an image of future value. The skills of execution serve that image. Without a future-directed vision, the skills remain disconnected activities. With it, they become elements of a coherent enterprise. The scientist follows a similar path. Years may be spent learning mathematics, experiential methods, conceptual analysis, and observation. These are highly refined skills, yet the acquisition of skill alone does not explain scientific discovery. Discovery occurs because the scientist remains oriented toward a question that has not yet been answered. The skills are instruments directed toward an unknown future understanding. The desire to know sustains effort long before knowledge is achieved. The future possibility organizes present activity. When viewed inductively across these domains, a common pattern emerges. The child acquires skills that expand possibilities. The parent applies skills toward the development of a future adult. The spouses employ skills toward the realization of a shared life. The entrepreneur refines skills to create future value. The scientist cultivates skills to uncover future knowledge. In every case, skill increases effectiveness within the present. But something else determines why that effectiveness is exercised in a particular direction. That something is purpose. Purpose appears not as an arbitrary preference, but as a developmental necessity arising from the temporal structure of human consciousness. Unlike other living beings, human beings do not live exclusively in the present. Perception reveals the immediate environment. Conception organizes experience into meaningful structures. And imagination projects possibilities beyond current reality. Volition operates across all three domains. It attends to the present, forms understanding from experience, and directs attention toward anticipated futures. Purpose is the stabilization of this future-oriented capacity. It is the mechanism by which volition extends itself through time. Skill governs how effectively action is performed in the present. Purpose governs why that action is sustained across time. Skill refines competence. Purpose preserves direction. Skill generates efficiency. Purpose generates continuity. Skill converts energy into action. Purpose determines where that energy is invested. The more refined the skill, the greater the available energy for future pursuits. The more coherent the purpose, the more effectively that energy can be organized and sustained. What begins as isolated acts of learning, caring, building, and discovering gradually reveals a universal principle. Human flourishing depends upon the integration of skill and purpose through volition. Skill is the refinement of present capacity. Purpose is the organization of future possibility. Volition unites them by directing attention, allocating energy, and maintaining continuity across time. The deepest significance of purpose, therefore, lies not merely in providing meaning, but in extending the temporal staying power of consciousness. Purpose allows a human being to remain psychologically present to a value that has not yet been realized. Through that continuity, the future begins to shape the present, and the present becomes the means through which the future is brought into existence. Purpose is thus not simply a goal among goals. It is the psycho-epistemological principle that organizes skill, sustains volition, and transforms isolated actions into an integrated life. It all begins with observable realities. A child learning to walk, a parent raising a child, spouses building a life together, an entrepreneur creating a business, and a scientist pursuing a question. In each case, the immediate phenomenon is skill acquisition and skill application. Only after examining these examples does the deeper pattern reveal itself. Skill alone cannot explain persistence across time. A person can possess immense skill and still abandon a project, a relationship, a profession, or a theory. The missing variable is not competence, but continuity. Purpose explains continuity. This leads to an interesting hierarchy. Attention permits perception. Perception permits learning. Learning permits skill. Skill permits effectiveness. Effectiveness permits surplus energy. Surplus energy permits long-range investment. Long-range investment permits purpose. Purpose permits continuity of integration through time. Viewed this way, purpose is not the beginning of development, but one of its highest achievements. It emerges from successful integration with reality and then becomes the organizing principle of future development. This also explains why purpose often becomes more important with age. A child needs competence. An adolescent needs identity. A mature adult increasingly needs purpose because the future horizon expands and the quantity of accumulated skill requires integration under a unifying direction. In the one-in-the-many terms, one might say that skill is the local expression of integration, while purpose is the global expression of integration. Skill governs the successful transformation of the immediate context. Purpose governs the continuity of transformations across contexts and across time. That observation may offer a powerful closing statement for this exploration. Skill allows a person to act effectively within a moment. Purpose allows a person to connect moments into a life. The greater the purpose, the longer the temporal horizon it unifies. The greater the skill, the more effectively that horizon can be realized. Human flourishing emerges from the continuous integration of both. The emergence of leadership reveals another principle that is often overlooked. Leadership is not merely the extension of purpose into society. It is the extension of responsibility into increasing larger fields of integration. A child is primarily responsible for regulating his own behavior. As competence develops, responsibility expands. The adolescent becomes responsible for choices and consequences. The adult becomes responsible for maintaining relationships, fulfilling obligations, and producing value. The parent assumes responsibility for another life. The entrepreneur assumes responsibility for employees, customers, suppliers, and investors. The statesman assumes responsibility for institutions that may affect millions of people. What changes throughout this progression is not merely the quantity of responsibility, but the scale of integration required to sustain it. Every expansion of responsibility demands a corresponding expansion of attention. One must perceive more variables, consider longer causal chains, account for a greater number of relationships. One must anticipate more possible futures. The challenge of leadership, therefore, is not fundamentally authority, but complexity. The individual who leads effectively can maintain coherence across a wider field of differentiated elements than those around him. He perceives connections where others perceive isolated events. He recognizes trajectories where others recognize only circumstances. He understands that every present condition is simultaneously the consequence of prior causes and the origin of future effects. This capacity does not emerge suddenly. It develops through repeated cycles of successful integration. The individual first learns to govern his own actions. Then he learns to govern his habits. Then he learns to govern his emotions. After that, he learns to govern his relationships. Then he learns to govern systems of cooperation. At each stage, the field expands while the principle remains unchanged. The challenge is always the same: maintaining order within increasing complexity. This observation helps explain why many people seek leadership while relatively few become capable of exercising it effectively. The visible rewards of leadership, status, recognition, influence, wealth, authority, are easily observed. The invisible burden is less obvious. Every increase in influence multiplies the number of relationships that must remain integrated. Every increase in responsibility multiplies the number of consequences that must be considered. Leadership therefore imposes a psychological requirement that many underestimate: the capacity to withstand uncertainty without abandoning purpose. The future never presents itself with complete clarity. Every meaningful undertaking contains ambiguity. Parents cannot know precisely who their children will become. Entrepreneurs cannot know precisely how markets will evolve. Scientists cannot know whether their theories will succeed. Statesmen cannot know every consequence of their decisions. If certainty were required before action, no significant achievement would ever occur. The leader, therefore, develops a unique relationship with uncertainty. He neither ignores it nor surrenders to it. Instead, uncertainty becomes the medium through which purpose operates. This is why courage and leadership are so frequently associated. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is the maintenance of purposeful action despite incomplete knowledge. Purpose allows action to continue when certainty is unavailable. Skill allows action to remain effective while certainty is unavailable. Together they generate resilience. Over time, this resilience creates an important transformation in the individual. The person ceases to view obstacles as contradictions of purpose and begins to understand them as conditions of purpose. Difficulty becomes information, resistance becomes feedback, failure becomes calibration. The future is no longer imagined as a destination waiting to be reached, but as a possibility requiring continuous refinement. This realization marks a profound developmental shift. The immature mind often seeks stability by eliminating uncertainty. The mature mind achieves stability by integrating uncertainty. At this stage, leadership ceases to be a role and becomes a way of relating to reality. The leader recognizes that every integrated achievement creates the conditions for a new frontier of differentiation. Every solved problem reveals a more complex problem. Every attained purpose generates the possibility of a higher purpose. This is why human development never truly ends. The parent who successfully raises a child begins to influence a family. The entrepreneur who successfully builds a company begins to influence an industry. The scientist who successfully discovers a principle begins to influence a civilization. The scale changes, but the process remains constant. Integration generates capacity. Capacity generates responsibility. Responsibility generates purpose. Purpose generates leadership. And leadership generates new opportunities for integration. The cycle repeats at a higher level. Viewed from this perspective, leadership is not the accumulation of development, but one stage within an endless process of becoming. The individual who emerges from the many does not stand apart from humanity. Rather, he exemplifies a possibility latent within every human being. The capacity to extend attention into skill, skill into purpose, purpose into influence, and influence into leadership through the continuous integration of life across time. The ultimate measure of leadership, therefore, is not the number of followers one acquires, the wealth one accumulates, or the authority one commands. It is the degree to which one's purpose successfully integrates increasing complexity into coherent value for oneself and others. Leadership is the sustained organization of value through time. The recurrence of the tetratic form throughout the sciences suggests that integration is not merely a psychological phenomenon, but a universal logic of development. Physics reveals the conditions under which existence can persist. Chemistry reveals how differentiated elements can enter into stable relationships. Biology reveals how organized systems preserve themselves through transformation. Psychology reveals how consciousness can direct that transformation toward chosen ends. At every level, the same pattern appears. Identity must be established, relationships must be formed, energy must be mobilized, and continuity must be maintained through time. The sciences, therefore, do not present isolated descriptions of reality. They reveal successive expressions of an increasingly sophisticated process of integration. Within human life, this process becomes conscious through the progression of skill, purpose, and leadership. Skill is the refinement of integration in action. Through disciplined attention, the individual learns to coordinate perception, conception, and behavior into increasingly effective patterns of performance. Purpose extends this integration through time by organizing present action around a projected future state. It provides the stability necessary for sustained development and transformations, isolated acts into a coherent trajectory of growth. Leadership emerges as the highest social expression of this process. The individual who has cultivated skill and aligned it with purpose acquires the capacity to influence the integration of others, not through domination, but through the articulation of a vision that organizes attention, energy, and action toward the creation of value. Seen from this perspective, leadership is not fundamentally a position but a function. It is the capacity to embody and communicate a higher order of integration. Just as gravity gathers matter, chemical bonds unite atoms, and biological regulation preserves life, leadership gathers human effort around meaningful aims. The leader becomes a living demonstration of the principle that greater differentiation requires greater integration. The more complex the challenge, the more refined the integration required to meet it. This may ultimately be the deepest lesson revealed by the tetraedic architecture of reality. The universe unfolds through increasing levels of organized complexity, and each level depends upon a corresponding increase in integration. Human flourishing is therefore not an exception to nature, but its continuation. Through the development of skill, the pursuit of purpose, and the exercise of leadership, consciousness participates knowingly in the same integrative process that has shaped matter, life, and mind from the beginning. In this sense, the one in the many is not merely a description of reality, it is an invitation to participate consciously in the ongoing creation of higher orders of unity, meaning, and value. This is the one in the many. The principle of life is the process of integration from a single cell to an ideal human being. The story of life unfolds through integration, from a single percept to a library of knowledge. Through virtue, reason, honesty, independence, selfishness, productivity, you set your values, purpose, to achieve self-esteem and happiness. Through time and energy, from induction to integration to reduction, the smallest particle unifies matter, and the highest purpose unifies your life. You, the one in the many, matter. May you integrate your life with value-driven days.